There's a recurring pattern in American frontier history that keeps resurfacing in 2025 the more complicated modern life becomes. The more obvious it is that the old ways were often the stronger ones. Nowhere is this clearer than in wood preservation. Today, people complain that fence posts rot after 2 seasons, garden beds decay in 3, and outdoor beams split under sun and rain. Yet homestead cabins from the early 1800s still stand, with original timbers that survived storms, winters, insects, and decades of hard use. Those families didn't have manufactured sealants or chemical preservatives. Their protection techniques came from direct experience and necessity, and they treated wood with a level of care that most people today completely overlook. What you're about to learn is the same method their survival depended on. A method that preppers in 2025 are rediscovering because it simply works. If you've ever tried to build anything outdoors, tool handles, shelters, raised beds, water troughs, and you felt frustrated by how quickly the wood failed, this forgotten homestead method will change the way you work. For the next few minutes, you're going to hear exactly how frontier families made their timber last long enough to support entire generations. The process began before a single board was ever cut or shaped. Homesteaders treated wood as a living material because they understood that its condition at the moment of felling influenced everything that came afterward. Trees were cut during the coldest months, when sap flow was reduced and internal moisture was at its lowest. This wasn't superstition. High sap content feeds fungi, bacteria, and insects. By felling in winter, they eliminated one of the biggest contributors to future rot. You can apply this principle even with modern lumber. Whether you're using pine, cedar, or hardwood boards, give them time to rest in a shaded, well-ventilated place before you begin working. Stand the boards vertically or lay them on risers so air flows across all sides. Even 2 or 3 days of natural drying can release hidden moisture that factories leave behind. This small step creates a foundation that all later treatments can build upon. The next stage relied on slow seasoning, allowing internal moisture to escape in a controlled way. Frontier families didn't rush the drying process. Boards were stored beneath overhangs, lean-tos, or the shaded sides of barns. They were kept out of direct sun to prevent warping but fully exposed to wind. The goal wasn't to remove all moisture instantly. It was to let the wood settle into its long-term shape. If you want to follow the same practice, stack your lumber with small spaces between each board. Leave it for several days or longer if the wood feels cool and damp when touched. This gradual moisture release strengthens the wood and prevents future cracking. At the core of the homestead method was, this idea of saturating wood with warm oil, which would then harden inside the fibres. Now, this is where things sort of shift, from just preparing the wood to actually preserving it for the long haul. Early homesteaders would heat up natural oils, often raw linseed oil or even rendered animal fat, just enough to thin them out so they could really seep into the grain. Warm oil, you see, travels much deeper than cold oil. It pushes out any leftover moisture and fills the wood fibres with a hydrophobic layer that keeps out rot, mould and swelling. Once the oil had cured, the wood became denser, less porous, and honestly, a lot more stable, even when the weather changed. If you want to try this today, you'll want to warm up raw linseed oil using a double pot method. Then just brush it on slowly, letting the wood really soak it up. When that first coat gets tacky, go ahead and add a second one. Whether it's tool handles, axe shafts, shed supports, benches, or garden bed frames. This one step can, dramatically increase their lifespan. A second protective layer was added using pitch or pine tar that sealed the exterior from moisture. Homesteaders didn't rely solely on oils. They added a resin-based barrier made from heated pine pitch or thick pine tar. Once applied, this coating cooled into a flexible shell that prevented external water from penetrating the surface. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't decorative, it was functional armour, and it remained effective even when the wood touched soil or sat in damp conditions. In modern practice, warm pine tar is the closest equivalent. You apply it to any wood that will face heavy rain, sun exposure or ground contact. Use it on the bottom of fence posts, the legs of outdoor furniture, the underside of tool storage boxes, or the exposed ends of beams. When done correctly, it resists water far more reliably than most synthetic coatings that crack under temperature changes. The final step of the Homestead method relied on slow, natural curing rather than artificial drying. Once coated with oil and tar, the wood wasn't thrown into use immediately. Homesteaders set it aside in shaded open air, allowing the oils to polymerize and the pitch to harden. This slow cure produced timber that could resist seasons of abuse without failing. You can follow this same step by leaving your treated boards under a porch or shed roof for at least 48 hours. The curing phase may not look dramatic, but it determines whether your treatment becomes a permanent bond or a temporary surface coat. If you were building a survival shelter, food storage shed, or long-term homestead infrastructure today, you could replicate the method exactly as pioneers did. Prepare the wood, dry it fully, saturate it with warm oil, seal it with pine tar. Allow it to cure. That's the sequence that kept cabins standing long before manufactured sealants existed. And, honestly, it still outperforms many modern products because it works with the natural structure of the wood, not against it. If you value historical knowledge that has stood the test of centuries, make sure you subscribe to Echoes of Valor and share this guide with others who take preparedness seriously. This is the kind of skill that lasts.